Welcome to RadioCastAoE. I found an Arabia game today. Navi in blue versus meichthys in red. They're in the 1100 range. And we will fire it up and see what happens. We have red as Koreans and blue as Britons. This is Arabia. Yes, Arabia. Koreans v Britons. Initially, I would probably put my money on the Britons. They're considered stronger on Arabia, I believe. But Koreans have some strong units, and especially after their latest buff, where their wood units cost less wood. Sure, wood is often plentiful on most maps, but it's always nice to get away with less spending on a resource that, especially in Castle Age, you need a lot of wood in the early Castle Age to build all the stuff you want to build, and then the wood cost of units on top of that, especially if you go crossbows, can be quite taxing on your economy. So we'll see if that is what happens. Now, of course, I don't know if you necessarily want to go archers against the Britons. That is kind of playing their game. And the Britons will probably play it better with faster producing ranges and better range. But there are also other options, such as the war wagon for the Koreans. So Koreans down here found sheep pretty fast, got the two houses up. Same thing with the Briton. Of course, the Britons also have the faster gathering on their herdables. It's meant to play on the English tradition of sheep and wool production, I'm sure, but it does also apply to other herdables. So even though there are cows here, it applies to cows as well. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the stats here, see if there's anything making a difference between the two players. The Briton player does go 6 on herdable. With the faster rate of collection for the Britons, it is possible to maintain villager production with only 5. But of course, that's a play. It's a payoff if you want the extra food income, or if you want everything to go faster, right? If you want to get the feudalage faster with one less villager. That depends what you want to do later. But it seems Navi here, our Briton player, is just playing it standard. 6 on herdable, cow in this case, then 4 on wood, and I'm assuming the next one will get in a boar. Populations are identical with the two. Well, the Korean player, Meicht, which I will call him, is actually half a villager or so behind. So he must have had an idle TC at some point. That's a house. Yeah, I was about to say that's a terrible lumber camp, but no, that's a house. So he's starting to wall off between two wood lines. That's why the house ended up at the end of the wood line, naturally enough. So it looked like a horrible lumber camp, but it was not. That is the first boar coming in for the Briton player. He also starts building houses to get some walling going, and he's going out to berries. Same thing with Meicht for the Koreans, but he's a little slow at the boar. I assume that was also his first boar. Yes, it was. So it seemed the Briton player, he's not in the lead score-wise, but I believe that must be scouting, a little stronger scouting from the Korean player. He has 50 points or so more, 50-60 points. Favor Koreans, but populations are actually up for the Briton. The Briton player has one more villager at this point. Bringing in the second boar, Briton player. And he's on 17 pop. We'll see if he goes up on on 21, or if he will go further and perhaps do a more standard archer play. Archers is considered a little more expensive, so you often go up on 22 or 23 to have enough resources to afford everything you need. The blacksmith is pretty much a must if you go archers, because you need fletching. Not so much so with the scouts, as you can get away without upgrades. Or obviously you can pick up bloodlines, which is available from the stable, so you don't need the blacksmith for that. A housing for the Korean player, so he is rushing down a house here. That, since it wasn't planned out, that it's not going to be a house that is part of the wall, it's just a random house next to the mill. But that's probably smart, so get that up fast and keep production going. He picked up loom in the meantime, so that's good. But he is now down 2 population. 19 villagers to 21 for the Britain player. And Britain player is... Let's see, he's going up on 22 villagers. Yeah, so that's pretty standard. He's sending, it seems so far, only 1 out gold. So that will not be very many archers, if that's what he's thinking. He probably needs a little more. Oh yeah, there he sends 3 more, that's good. Then he can at least maintain villager production. Well, not for too long, because you have spent quite a lot of gold. He has only 10 gold. He must have, yeah, he's making militia. Yep, okay. Or rather, men-at-arms, probably. He has 2 militia right now, but they're just sitting garrisoned in the barrack, and he's halfway to feudalage, so he's probably going to play men-at-arms play. The Korean player is not on his way to feudalage yet. He's just pumping out villagers. It seems he actually wants to try a fast castle, it seems, from the population. They both have 20... No, sorry. He has 24 villagers, and the Britain player went up on 21, so he's stuck on 21 whilst upgrading to, or aging. There the Britain player reaches feudal age, and he continues villager production. He's also... No, I can't see him putting down any range just yet, but he is doing the man-at-arms upgrade. He has not moved out, or has he? Oh yeah, I'm blind. He's already at the Korean player's base with 3 militia, and they become men-at-arms in this very moment. There. And then he's moving in, and he will catch a Korean villager trying to wall the back side of the Korean base. So that's good for the Britain player. Korean player is not yet clicking up. Yes, he is. Okay, sorry. He's 40% to feudalage. And he's defending himself well. He was almost protecting himself well, defending himself well. Well, these men-at-arms are getting, the Britain men-at-arms are getting too close to the TC, taking quite a lot of TC fire. Korean villagers trying to fight off the men-at-arms. Actually, fairly successfully. He lost 1 villager, but the Britain player lost 2 men-at-arms. And the 3rd one is almost caught. Yeah, he is getting caught within the red or Korean wood line, and is not successfully killing any more villagers. So that was not very good payoff for that man-at-arms play. That was 1 villager down, as far as I could count. Maybe 2. Let's check the kills. Isn't that something I can see here? No? Huh, I thought it was a KD. Oh yeah, there, KD. Okay. So the blue player, the Briton, killed 1. Yeah, so he has lost 3 men-at-arms for 1 villager. Probably not worth it. Now, though, he is making archers and skirms from double range. And he seems to have a fairly healthy economy behind that. So he will follow up with ranged units. As expected, the Korean player is trying to build some walls, but they look pretty strange. He has a string of Oh, he's walling villagers, gonna get killed by a wolf far away from home. That's unfortunate. Yeah, the Korean player is building very extensive walls. He's trying to pretty much wall off the whole map sideways instead of making any sort of... well, that's not true, but he's walling off essentially a quarter of the map instead of making a more compact circle around his base. And that is probably going to hurt him because these walls will not go up. The Briton ranged units, both archers and skirmishers, will be upon him. Briton players being housed, he's pumping out units from 2 ranges, so that requires pretty extensive house building. That on top of villager production. If we look at the villagers right now, there is 31 Briton villagers against 27 Korean villagers. Score is fairly close. It's about 90 points difference in Britain favor. That's probably army count making out most of that difference. Army and villager count, so unit count. Keep in mind the Korean player actually has the most kills. It's still 3 to... well, it's 3 to 2 KD, but the wolf, Gaia, has 1 kill. So Korean player 3 kills and Briton player 1 kill with those initial men-at-arms. But archers and skirmishers are coming in. They have no upgrades though. I think the Briton player doesn't even have a blacksmith. Nope, no blacksmith for the Briton player. And the archers and skirmishers are actually getting hunted down by 1 single scout. And that's an unupgraded scout as well. And they probably should have just taken that fight rather than run and just slowly get killed. That was 2 archers and 1 skirm. They probably could have defended themselves somewhat against that 1 unupgraded Korean scout. But that is not to be. They tried to get away and were unsuccessful. A larger Briton force of 9 archers are coming in to avenge those that vanguard though, and they are easily killing off the Korean scout. My cat is going crazy because he hasn't been fed today. Well, that doesn't mean he is starving, it just means he hasn't had any fresh food. He still has food from yesterday, so don't think I'm being cruel to my cat. They're actually very lucky. Anyway, the Briton player is beating his way through the Korean palisade walls, and that was a lot of Korean walling pretty much for nothing. A lot of wasted wood. Sure, your units as Koreans cost less wood, but that doesn't mean you should waste your wood on meaningless palisades. Now there's some desperate house walling going on. More in the way I think the Korean player should have built his walls initially. It seems the Briton player has somewhat... yeah, he hasn't just somewhat. He has fairly nicely kept up with his eco, and he now has 38 villagers against 28 for the Korean player. It seems the Korean player is quite distracted by all this aggression going on in his base, with 10 archers now barreling down on his farms. But the Korean player does have some scout cavalry, 4 scout cavalry, but no upgrades, and villagers are starting to go down. It seems the Briton player is taking advantage of his civilization's strength, going archers, putting the pressure on the Korean player, and being successful with that. Korean cavalry is coming in, trying to defend their town. This could actually be pretty good. This is 5 scout cavalry getting right in among these archers, and the archers have no upgrades, no fletching, no padded archer armor. 1 horse going down, but the archers are disappearing fast. The archers have a fairly good position, but it's not super good, and this is a cleanup. This is a cleanup. That's 10 Briton archers and 1 Briton light cav going down for the cost of 2 Korean light cav and a fair amount of HP on the remaining ones, but that was a great fight for the Korean player. Very good defense. A problem still remains for the Korean player though. He doesn't really have units that can put the pressure on the Briton player. The Briton player is fully walled. The blacksmith is up. I bet he's kicking himself the Briton player that he didn't do that earlier and got that fletching, because then his initial force would still be alive and they could have easily killed those scout calves. But he has maintained production, and he now has 8 new archers waiting, and more importantly, he is 90% on the way to Castle Age. So behind this attack, the Briton player has actually managed to advance to Castle Age. And these ranged units will soon go from archers to crossbows. He's actually continuing villager production and picking up bowsaw, crossbow, bodkin, and continuing double archer production. So he has the resources he needs to take advantage of that Castle Age as well. The Korean light cav, there are now 7 of them, are trying to beat their way into the Briton base through the palisades. They will be successful at that, but the Briton player is forcing up a town center close to where the scout cavalry are coming, plus he's moving 8 bodkin arrow crossbows over there. So I don't think these light cav will, or they're not even light cav, they're scout cav. Scout cav will have much choice. Yeah, these crossbows are one-shotting the scout cav, so they have to turn tail and flee. And the Briton player is in an absolutely commanding position right now. 3 TCs, continuing crossbow production, continuing villager production from all TCs, yes. And the Korean scout cav is in retreat and did not do any damage. The Korean player is on his way to Castle Age now, but if we have a look at the villager count, it is quite brutal. 60 Briton villagers against 40 Korean villagers, and remember, the Briton villagers are being pumped out as we speak from 3 town centers against the Korean 1. Korean player is in Castle Age, and he is currently putting down 2 new town centers, so the town center lead will soon be gone for the Briton player, but of course he has had that lead for some time before the Korean player got his town centers up. So yeah, that shows quite clearly in the villager count. Almost 70 villagers for the Briton player now, and also 18 military units. So he has close to, well, there's a dozen crossbow barreling down on the Korean player right now, and of course these Briton Castle Age crossbow are very deadly with their range of no less than 8. Briton player has a very healthy economy. He's a little low on wood, so he's unable to reseed some of his farms, and he is also struggling a bit with the production of new crossbow. His ranges are idle at the moment. But he is saving up for Imperial Age, it seems. He is actually not too far away. He's putting down a university, and I'm assuming another Castle Age building will also come up so that he can click Imp in not long. He's on 1,000 wood right now, and he's also on 650 gold. He keeps making some villagers. He needs that building, though. It seems he's focusing on what's going on the front right now. Oh, the Korean player is getting a good surround with scout cav and just a few knights. It seems the crossbow, melee pathing is not fixed unless these are on stand ground, which I doubt they are. That was nasty. That was nasty. Those cav were just standing there watching, doing nothing. They did get a good surround, actually, on the crossbow, even though the crossbow were up against the wood line. So it looked alright to begin with, but then we had another thanks D moment, and those cavalry units just stood there doing nothing. Now we have some pretty weak crossbows trying to find a good defensive spot inside a pocket of a wood line here. But 5 Korean knights barreling down on them. The Briton player has not picked up ballistics yet, so he's actually not doing any damage to the moving knights. And these knights pretty much have the Britain army bottled up. And the Britain units are split up a little bit. There is a force of 8 in one part of the Korean base, and then there are a couple of other crossbow that were just cleaned up by the knights. So that's not fortunate to have small groups of crossbow moving around. The crossbow need to be in one big ball that the knights cannot engage. And this is not too bad for the Korean player. He now has 9 knights that are about to surround these poor crossbows, and the crossbows are even weak. So yeah, this is an engagement the Korean knights can take. Now we just have to hope that DE is being nice to these knights and actually let them fight. And it seems DE was nice. That was a good cleanup. That was 1 knight lost to 8 crossbows. So that Britain attempt to do damage to the Korean player was rather unsuccessful. Importantly though, the Britain player is almost in imp at this point. So while that engagement was going on in the Korean base, the Britain player was going up to the next age, just like he did between Feudal Age and Castle Age. The Korean player is trying to take some map control. He's building a castle in the middle of the map on a small elevation, and there the Britain player reaches Imperial Age. But he doesn't have a very big force at this point. He has kind of wasted units. The military count is 13 for the Britain player and 12 for the Korean player. That's not really good for the Britain player. He has gone to Imperial Age to get to his very valuable unit, the Arbalestier. And there he gets the Arbalest, but it's only 13 Arbalests. Well, I mean, Britain Arbalest with Bracer and Chemistry, which is also picking up, is of course very deadly, but he seems to not have ballistics yet. That's a big mistake. With ballistics, he could have denied these Korean knights completely. The Korean player is still going knights. I'm hoping to see war wagons. I think war wagons will be effective because of their high pierce armor. War wagons, maybe rams, and then some knights, I think will be a fortunate combination for the Korean player here. Even though the Korean player is down 1,000 points, I don't think he's down and out. I think if he can only survive long enough to get a bit of an army up and maybe secure Imperial Age for himself for some better tech, I think it's doable. But of course, this massive range on the Britain archers, it's always dangerous. The Korean player is trying to engage with his knights, but he's running into a newly built castle and the entire force of Britain Arbalests. This is not good. This is a throw, I would say. The whole Korean force of knights is annihilated by the Britain Arbalests, and now even longbows are coming out with the extra damage. I think, shouldn't there be extra damage? I thought oh yeah, of course, you can go elite longwoman and then you get more damage. That's how it works. The Britain archers are actually outranging the Korean tower. The Koreans need some range upgrades from their blacksmith to defend against this, but it doesn't really matter because the as you can hear, the Britain player has his trebuchets out and the Korean tower in the middle of the map is going down. I think with the waste of those Korean knights, it's looking rather bleak. The Korean player is trying to build skirmishers, but against longbows, skirmishers aren't really that effective because they are being totally... Wow. The Britain player deleted his trebuchet for some reason. That must have been a grievous misclick. But I don't think it's going to matter much. He will still quite easily defend against these knights and skirmishers from the Korean player. And he can replenish his trebuchets. He has 2 on the field right now. It doesn't seem like the Korean player has any. And that is obviously the case since he's still in Castle Age. Yeah, this seems rough for the Korean player now. I think we can almost say that unless the Britain player seriously throws, he has this game in the bag. One more salvo from the trebuchets, and the Korean player should lose his castle in the middle. There, that's the castle down. A Korean army is pretty much non-existent. There are a handful, like 8 skirmishers. That's it. And the Britain player is not really creating much army. So that is maybe the Koreans' chance here. If they were to come back, it would have to be with some great push against a Britain army that is not really being replenished. The Britain player is probably so confident at this point that he assumes he will win no matter what. That might be true, especially because he's putting pressure on the Korean production buildings. So an overwhelming force from the Koreans was probably not likely. Anyway, it's 5 trebuchets from the Britain player at this point, and he's one-shotting whatever he sets his eyes on. Knights, skirmishers, and there the game is over. It was kind of written on the wall there in the last few minutes. The Britain player kept the pressure on from the first age to the last, or at least the second age. There was some feudal age aggression. Not very effective, well, it seemed not very effective, but it could possibly have been more effective than you can really tell from a spectator's point of view, because it does something mentally to the Korean player, and it keeps him on the back foot a little bit. And gives the Britain player the initiative he needs to then push on with new aggressive moves again and again, never really taking damage at home, and getting to that long range archer play with trebuchets as siege that he wants to get to in the end. So well played from our Britain player, although there were a few throws of valuable units in the Korean base. But then again, that kind of aggressive play, even though it's costly, on paper, it might be messing with the Korean player's mind a little bit, and making sure the Britain player is safe at home. So maybe it was a good place. At least it secured the victory. So GG, well played.